Jonas Ecker. I am a sprint kayaker and surfski paddler based up in Washington. Uh, I don't want to spoil too much of my presentation, but I did go to the Olympics. I've been paddling for about or not 13. I started paddling in 2013, and I've been paddling for I guess 11 years now, just about. I love the sport. Just really, it's a good excuse to get outside and stay healthy.
2013. Look, why don't we go ahead and let you just get started? Take it away.
Awesome. I will
So Brian, can you take
send.
down your shared screen so we can see the speaker?
Yep, we've got
Yeah.
boom.
Oh.
Look at that. Look at that. Jim asking shall receive.
All right. Can you guys see my PowerPoint at the moment? I'll open it up. Can you guys see it? All good?
Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. So my name is Jonas
Jonas,
Ecker, like I said.
that would be great. Sorry, Jonas, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, no worries. My name is Jonas Ecker. This is my pronouns are he, him. Like I said, I'm from Bellingham, Washington. And let's kind of jump into my Olympic experience. We'll kind of take it from the beginning of how I got into paddling a little bit, and then all the steps that ultimately led me to the start line and finish line in Paris. So, first, a little bit of background about myself. I'm, like I said just earlier, I'm currently attending the University of Washington, studying marine biology with a minor in chemistry. And I do sprint kayaking. You guys are all sea kayakers. And for those who don't know, sprint kayaking, let's me go to the next slide, maybe not. There we go. Is classified as canoe sprint. And so on the left there, you see a canoe paddler. That's Nevin Harrison. She's the current Olympic silver medalist in women's canoe 200 and the Tokyo gold medalist. And then that's me on the right. And the two disciplines within canoe sprint or canoeing is what Nevin's doing, which is a single bladed paddle with you're up on one knee, only paddling on one side. But then the kayak discipline, which is very similar to sea kayaking, we just paddle a little skinnier, a little faster boats with a two-bladed paddle facing forward. Goal of both, get to from A to B as fast as possible. In the Olympics, you'll see us racing in, at least for men's kayak, singles, doubles, and four-person boats across distances of 1,000 and 500 meters. But at World Champs, there'll be one, two, and four-person boats for both boat classes across 200, 500, and 1,000 meter distances. And we race kind of like a track meet on the water, basically, is how I like to describe it, which is just we race in lanes, A to B, fastest person wins. So now getting kind of into my story. Um, First strokes, this is a gorgeous picture of Lake Padden from a couple weeks ago where I grew up training. And on the left here, you'll see me in the middle with multiple coats on at a very, very rainy regatta. I started paddling in 2013 with a summer camp that was started up in Bellingham with the Bellingham Canoe and Kayak Sprint Team, those gorgeous fluorescent yellow jerseys you see on there. Um, and then from there, I fell in love with the sport. It was a great way to have a team environment, but also be kind of accountable for your own success. And so I kind of ran with that and competed at my first nationals in 2015. Slight lie, that photo's from 2016, but I didn't have any from 2015, so let's gloss over that. But that is the Oklahoma venue where nationals is often hosted. And then from there, I learned that you can compete internationally for in canoe sprint for the USA, and so that's me on the right in the boat with Jasper Cadell, who is I guess you're always a member, but a former Rivertown paddler, competing at the Olympic Hopes Regatta in 2018. And that was kind of my first exposure to international canoe kayak racing. It was an amazing experience. I learned a lot. The most foremost thing I learned was that I was not ready for international competition. It was a really cool experience, but I didn't do very well. Very few athletes on our team did do well, and that showed me that there was a lot more to go before I could compete it with athletes outside of the U.S. Because at that time, I was doing well in the U.S. I was around and on the podium for U.S. national events, but when racing internationally, I think we made it to semifinals. but didn't even make it into the A or the B final, which would have been top 18. And so that was really eye-opening. And so then that following season through the winter, it was really motivating and led me to competing in 2019 again at the Olympic Hopes Regatta, which is where I won my first international medal, which you'll see in the middle here. This was in the men's K1 500 meter sprint distance for the U17 age division. And so a little bit sidebar on Olympic Hopes. It's basically a under 17, under 16, under 15 world championships event. It's not an official world championships, but it has, it's the largest international competition for athletes of that age. And so achieving this was incredibly exciting. I am not 100% sure, but I think it is one of the only, if not one of the few medals that the US has achieved in men's kayak at this event. It is definitely one of, we have not achieved many. We've had great success in women's canoe over the years, but I do believe this was one of the first for men's kayak, which was incredibly exciting. And then from there, that really showed me that, wow, maybe I can make a name for myself in a sense of I could take this somewhere. And so the following year was supposed to be or would have been my chance to compete at the Junior World Championships or under 18 World Champs. But as we all know, COVID came along and kind of shattered that dream. There wasn't no racing in 2020. And then in 2021, I was able to race the under 23 World Championships, where I did okay. I was mid-pack in the B final, so right about 16th, 15th overall in my events, which I had good races. I wasn't able to compete for a podium or a medal spot, but I was proud of the progression I had made. And so that kind of leads me to where the Olympic journey aspect of this really starts. And that's in 2022. You'll see me here in the front of this K2 with Aaron Small in the back, my doubles partner. And in 2022, this was the first year that or I guess in 2021, to back up a little bit, I was the first year that I won all sprint distances at the US national championships. And I've done so since 2021, which has been a great measure, I think, of my determinations and push to achieve more and to improve. And so in 2022, after the U.S. national team trials, I was named to the Senior World Championships team, Pan American Championships team, and Under 23 World Championships team. And this photo here being from U23 Worlds in Szeged, Hungary. And in 2022, our biggest event that year was supposed to be the Under 23 World Championships, but Aaron and I were selected for the senior national team, being the top two athletes at the U.S. national trials, and went into that competition with the idea of this is a great learning experience, as I'd gone into my first Olympic Hopes Regatta, and started the line saying the worst thing that can happen is we don't learn anything. Our goal was to learn and to observe competing at the senior world championship level, because at this time I was 19, maybe 20, and Aaron was just a year older than me. So we were quite young athletes, and didn't really expect much from ourselves other than to do our best in the senior world championships event. But then race after race, we had a strong heat racing well, and then we ended up in the semifinal where we got third, which progressed us to the A final, which was a monumental result for American paddlers, especially ones so young as us. And then in that A final, we ended up in a 7th place overall, which was incredible, way beyond our expectations, and really kicked off again this whole Olympic journey, because the most important thing is to get to the Olympics, you have to qualify. And I won't bore you guys with the nitty-gritty details of too much of the process, but basically at the World Championships the year prior to the Olympics, so that would have been 2023, if you place top 6 in an Olympic event, you get to go to the Olympics, or your country gets to send a boat to the Olympics. And so placing 7th in 2022 as young athletes, we were like, holy smokes, what could we do in a year? Could we make it to the Olympics? And so then directly after Senior World Championships, we raced the Pan American Championships, which we won, which was also incredibly exciting. And then going to U23 World Championships, we medaled and won bronze and set an American record in the process. And so all those things adding up showed that, wow, there's a possibility here to take this even further, and see what we could do to reach the Olympics. And so the following season in 2023 and 2024, we kind of went all in on the K2 500 meters, which was the Olympic distance for men's double kayak. And so then in 2023 was a jam-packed year because of all the different races we had. We raced the first the World Cup, which is a World Championships level event, but is for basically it's like practice. You get a medal, but it doesn't mean you're world champion or doesn't qualify you for anything. It's just another chance to race athletes at the highest level. And then we raced the Senior World Championships, the Olympic test event, and the 2023 Pan American Games. And so this season was a little eye-opening in a sense. Our world's result was, I think, inflated by the fact that the worlds took place in Halifax, Canada, up in Nova Scotia, which resulted in a lower turnout and a slightly less competitive field that resulted in us getting a higher result than we would have or than we did at the 2023 World Championships. But also given it being an Olympic year, it was a lot more competitive, and a lot more athletes were focused on trying to get these spots. And so all in all, we attempted to qualify. We had a lot of good races, but ultimately did not qualify at World Championships in 2023. But then we continued the year out to race at the Santiago Pan American Games, which we again medaled bronze. But that from those events, we knew we were in the running for the last chance continental qualifier spot. But again, you can't take anything for granted until you've crossed the line. And so that leads us to March of 2024, which was the first step to qualifying for the Olympic team, which at this point, we didn't have any Olympic spots. We didn't know if we were going to get to go or not, but we still had to try out for the national team. And so best case scenario was the result. I won both the men's singles events, and then Aaron and I won the men's double event, which gave us the best chance to qualify for the Olympics. And although we were named to the provisional Olympic team at this time, we still had to go compete at the continental Olympic qualifiers to then actually go to the Olympics. And at that event, we had to either win the K2 together, or I had to come top 2 in the singles event to qualify for the Olympics. Of course, best case scenario would be for us to qualify the men's double, because then we both get to compete at the Olympics. We've been on this journey together, and neither of us would be in this scenario without the other person. And so the double continued to be our goal. And so after many training camps, both before trials and after trials, we got to the Continental Olympic qualifiers, which took place in Sarasota, Florida. And as these pictures show, and the start of this presentation kind of spoiled a little bit, we qualified successfully, winning the men's K2. And so on the left there, that's us mid-race. In the middle, that's us with our golden ticket, with the head of our national governing body, Beth Spillman, and then us hugging after the finish line, realizing, holy smokes, we've made this dream come true. And so that was the craziness of early season, but now we're kind of jumping into the real racing. And to prepare for the Olympics, we elected to race the Under-23 World Championships, which took place just before the Olympics. And so for those events, I raced the men's K1 as well as the men's K2 with Aaron, and we competed in the heats and progressed all the way through to the A final. And based on our previous results, we had hoped to be in contention for medals. And our heats and semifinals were great races. We were of the top 2 or top 3 times, progressing through every time. We won both our heat and our semifinal, but coming to the A final, we just didn't quite have the race we needed and finished in 5th, which in a super close field, I believe the entire field was split by less than a second and a half. So you're really like looking at margins of who breathed just right when the gun went off. But it was a very strong field, and so it gave us a lot to learn going into the Olympics. But before then, I also competed in the men's K1 1000, which was also represented at the Olympics. And going into the event, I had not had much experience, or I'd raced it in the past, but I hadn't raced the Under-23 World Championships since 2021 due to our focus on, or since 2022, I should say, due to our focus on qualifying for the Olympics. And so going into that event, I didn't really have an idea of where it would be, but I was lucky enough to be lined up next to the reigning world champion, Tobias Hammer from Germany. And I was able to measure myself and see, he's currently, based on the results from last year, the best there is for our age group. So if I can stick with him, maybe I can be in the hunt for a medal. And so in our heat, we were the top two athletes qualifying through, a good 3 or 4 seconds clear of the rest of the field. And then in the semifinal, I also won that with him being in a different semifinal. And so we were the top two athletes going to the A final. And I'll go to the next slide, which does spoil it a little bit. But in that final, I ended up winning and coming first, which is, I believe, the first first under 23 world title for an American male kayaker in the history of the U.S. National Canoe Kayak Team. If that is incorrect, I'm terribly sorry, but to the best of my knowledge, that is true. And so this was an amazing achievement, but there wasn't really much time to think about it because the Olympics were coming up. We literally moved into the village the next day after I won this event. And so that leads us to what you guys all came for, the Olympics. And so opening ceremonies was absolutely incredible. I think the best way I can describe the whole Olympic experience was like Disneyland for athletes, or just, it was a fairy tale. You can see me on the middle right of that middle photo, with to my, or I guess to camera left is Casey Eichfeld. He's another member of obviously the U.S. delegation, but he's a canoe slalom athlete. And then Aaron to his, or to the further left of him. And so the opening ceremonies was incredible. I mean, we were with around 500, almost 600 athletes, or American athletes alone, on these boats that went down the River Seine, and seeing all of Paris, so much of the international sporting community come out to support us and cheer us on from the riverbanks was really incredible. And I think when we walked up into the Trocadero, which is the photo you'll see on the left, and then the zoom in photo on the right is below the Eiffel Tower, was when it really kind of felt real. And we heard Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC, officially opening the games. It really hit that, holy smokes, this is a lifelong dream we've had, and here we are. And I think every bit of it was a little hard to believe, but looking back now, it was truly an incredible experience. But that was the fun part. Now for the serious part, and that's racing. And so, like at U23s, I competed in the men's K2 500 meters with Aaron, as well as the men's K1 1000 meters, and I'll talk about those a little bit separately here. But this photo right here is from our first heat on the first day of our racing. The interesting thing about Olympics racing is a little different than our normal World Championships events, is that their qualification system, or progression system, I should say, is a little bit different. There's more races in the schedule. And so on the first day of racing, we had heats and quarterfinals. And then if we progress through those, we'd have the chance to race in semifinals and A or B finals. And so in the quarterfinal, or in the heats, I should say, the top two athletes qualified direct to the semifinal, but then everybody else went to the quarterfinal. And so, but that was only about an hour and a half later. And so not very quick turnaround time, not much time for rest in between. And so going into our heat, we knew that if we weren't top two, we were going to strategically retire in a sense and chill out, because shouldn't be killing yourself if it doesn't mean anything. And so we raced the race super smart. We realized we weren't top two, but so cut the engines in a sense and cruised across the line. But then in our quarterfinal, that's when it really mattered. We had to qualify, I believe, top 4 to progress to the semifinal, and we were not lucky enough to make our own luck, but we were fast enough to qualify third through, which was a super exciting opportunity, because that means that we were the worst per se we could do would be 16th overall, because everyone in the semifinal qualified for either the A or the B final. And so this was the end of the first day of racing. But then come the semifinal, we knew that if we had a good race, the perfect race, we could qualify through to the A final. But we knew it would take a lot and would be an impressive feat for us being such young athletes, but also for America Canoe Sprint. And so again, this photo spoils it a little bit, but we did qualify through the A final and placing 4th in our heat, or in our semifinal. And this photo is me yelling exceptionally loud once our names came up on the screen, realizing that we had qualified through. And then once we raced in the A final, we finished 8th, which is last overall in the A final, but that is still an A final, which is the best result for men's kayak since 2000. So that's 24 years, longer than I've been alive. And so Aaron and I were incredibly happy with that. In the process, we set a new American record, reclaiming the one that some other athletes had set in 2022 or in 2023. And so overall, our K2 Olympic campaign was incredibly successful in our eyes. No, we didn't win a medal, but we showed that American sprint kayak is on the map, and that at this stage with these young athletes and the athletes that are coming up with Aaron and I, even if they aren't on the Olympic stage, that we can compete and that we have a future for the sport, and hopefully that we can build on that into the future. And then, like every journey, there are ups and downs, and that brings me to my K1000 event. I felt super strong and motivated and confident coming off of my under 23 world title, but due to there were, I guess the best way of putting it, there were weeds on the course that were not cleared by the home organizing committee. I was not able to put down my best race in the quarterfinal, which looking back, I would have had to have a good race to qualify through, but I felt like I had that in me. And so to go out in the quarterfinals was a little disappointing, especially for something out of my control. But again, you're racing on a natural course, that's boat racing. Not everything can go your way. And so it was still a fantastic experience to be able to race at that level, both in a double and a single. And so to end the Olympic experience, we had the closing ceremony, which I just feel kind of was like a big NASCAR party for the Americans, looking at those jackets. But coming into the ceremony through the tunnel in the Stade de France with all the American athletes, all training in USA, was super incredible. Just the energy from everybody, and everyone had just spent their entire lives, if at least the last four years or more, pushing to get to this moment, and to be able to appreciate it with both all the American athletes, but all the athletes and then the entire world joining us in the stadium was absolutely incredible. And so now that we're post Olympics, that brings up the question of what's next. Still figuring that out a little bit. I'm currently finishing up my undergraduate degree for, like I said earlier, at the University of Washington. And then if all goes to plan, I'd like to push for competing in LA in 2028. But, there's a long time between now and then. And so hopefully I can get back on the world stage in the spring and see what we can do. So that brings me to the end. Do you guys have any questions? Anything you want me to touch back on? Anything I went too fast over? I'm still working on this whole presenting thing.
Great job, Jonas, and we're very proud of you.
Thank you. I mean, any questions at all, doesn't have to be necessarily about what I talked about. It can be anything about the Olympics, paddling, whatever piques your interest.
I wondered if you could talk about your stroke, because everyone on the call cares about their forward stroke and
Yeah. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I wonder if I can probably put up a video that'll be a little more helpful than me talking about it. But while I do that, Susan, if you want to ask your question, I can probably answer that.
My question has to do with describing your training, because
yes,
your training is extremely intense and
yes,
and a model for those of us who aspire to come along behind you.
Yeah, so I train 2 to 4 times a day, 6 days a week usually. I'll do often at least 2 on-water sessions a day. And then I lift 3 times a week. And then in addition to that, I often do intervals and longer sessions on a bike, because a big part of paddling, which you'll see in the video if it hopefully loads, is the leg driving rotation. And so as I shared this, maybe if it lets me. So this video here is from the under 23 World Championships. It's a little grainy and shaky because it's filmed from a bike.
your
Oh.
home screen.
Sorry, my bad. I wonder why I did that. Thanks for letting me know. Is it
That's
showing?
it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm gonna see if I can share from the original file. But yeah, so I'm training a lot on the water as well as video analysis and just overall technical focuses, just to, because every bit of the stroke matters, every bit of how you're applying power. And so if you're not training your whole body for sprint paddling, you're missing out on applying power. And I know that's can be a little different from surf or from sea kayaking, because you don't have necessarily that rotation that we can achieve in a sprint boat. So that's my understanding. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But okay, here's this video. Let's see if I'm gonna move ahead a bit. Zoom in. So I'm in the black boat on the far side. And the biggest thing that I try to focus on, especially in this race, and right now we're braiding at about 105 to 110 strokes a minute. This is the men's K1 under 23,000 A final. But my biggest focus in this race, once we get past those signs, is getting as far out in front of me as possible for every stroke, because your power, at least in sprint paddling, comes from that first foot and a half of your blade being in the water. If your blade spends too much time in the water and begins to go negative, which is where the spoon or the pulling part of the blade is facing upwards, you're starting to pull the boat down. And so you want to do everything you can to avoid that. And so my stroke is all ideally in front of me. So I'm taking it out. So I can zoom in even more. Maybe even do a couple. Yeah. So it's a little grainy, I apologize, but you can see right there, I'm taking my blade out, and as I'm taking it out on the left side, I'm already set up for the next stroke. And so that's both maximizing. I'm not wasting energy moving my arms around. I'm getting as quickly and as efficiently from point A, being the exit, to point B, being the setup, and reaching as far forward as I can. And so that's probably a good 3 or 4 inches beyond my feet, because my feet are, see my knees here, and then my toes are probably right about there. And so I'm getting as far out in front of me, and that comes from rotating and bringing, if I'm taking a stroke on my right side, if I can play this over Zoom, I'm rotating my left hip back, my right hip forward, and that opens up my chest and allows me to get even further out with every stroke. And so then I apply it through the water, and I don't apply my leg drive until my blade is in the water, because if you apply your leg drive too early, that leads to basically you're unwinding your spring without any resistance. And so you're dissipating energy into thin air and missing out on that distance of the stroke. And so pulling through, and then it's out of the water and set it for the next stroke. So you can play it again at normal speed. And I feel this race, my biggest strength was my running speed. A lot of athletes find that the third 250 is their slowest. The splits from this race were not available to us yet, but the biggest gains I made against the field were in that third 250. As you can see at the start of the video, I was in line with the white boat, but then by this one, I'm about 3/4 of boat length ahead. And this orange buoy here is 200 meters to go. And then at this point, just kind of hold on and hope for the best. And I did. And so that was a great race in my book. Any other questions, or back on this one, if there's anything else I can cover?
One of the questions in the chat is, with all the
Yes.
costs involved, who helps with pay for all of this to go to the Olympics and stuff?
That's a fantastic question. So the Olympics itself is covered by the U.S. or the U.S. team is covered by the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So they covered our flights to and from Paris, and then accommodations, food, and everything while we were at the games. but given we were such a small sport, almost all the participation, qualification, travel, training expenses are all covered by each individual athlete for this sport. And I was lucky enough that this year, due to my Olympic qualification, our national governing body was able to provide some funding for competing at events and training camps that were part of my quote Olympic build. So supporting me going to the under-23 World Championships, as well as a training camp beforehand. But most years an athlete can be athlete competing at the senior elite level. Especially our team is very young, and so we have a lot of athletes that are quote double dipping. They're competing in U23s and as seniors. That's 2 events, that's 2 trips to Europe often. And so it can be easily, with the domestic competitions, easily $10,000 a year of just travel expenses, not including club costs or boats. I mean, a boat itself is $4,000 to $6,000 depending on the current tariffs and transit fees. And so easily an athlete can be spending $15,000 to $17,000 a year just on sport, which comes for me at least has come from great support from my community, as well as working, and then my parents who also have helped coach me throughout my time. So it's been a family affair. I think another
Alex want nitty-gritty stories from your Olympic experience. They want to know what it was like interacting with other athletes, international athletes, the French
international
people.
athletes. Yes. So I guess I think the most famous person I talked to is Simone Biles. We talked a surprising 3 times. One of Casey, who I showed in the slideshow, went through team processing with her when they both competed in Rio, and so they are acquaintances. And so when we were in the dining hall, he introduced us to the gymnastics team, and then I was coming back after a late night drug test, like 9 or 10 p.m. and I ended up in the elevator with Simone, and so we were just both chatting about how we were both up way too late, both too tired, and dreaded drug tests. Both support what they do, but oh my goodness, getting out of bed at 10 p.m. for a drug test is pretty brutal. Yeah, and then I guess international wise, the reception from the French people was amazing. They held their city out to us and had our sports intermixed in their venues. We caused so much traffic and all that with just the games being there. And so having a city open its doors like that was phenomenal. And then the next question is weight training program, for, as I'm quoting, for mortal kayakers, I guess those who aren't necessarily on an Olympic track or we're just doing it for fun. My biggest recommendation is working on shoulder stability and core stability. Those can be your biggest gains. So whether that's doing, my biggest recommendation is like band work with rotator cuff exercises, whether that's like strapping a resistance band and rotating. Susan's great about these. Her athletes do them all the time, way more than I ever do. But basically anything you can do to strengthen the smaller muscles, because anyone can muscle it in a boat, but that can lead to injury and other things. And so then leading to the second bit is that core stability. A lot of the time in sea kayaking or any boat, you end up in funky conditions, and stability is your biggest ally or your biggest foe. And so by building a strong core, you're less impacted by those funky conditions. But I guess for me, I do a lot of full body exercises I talked about earlier, like typical bench press. A lot of athletes squat. I personally don't squat due to injuries I've had, but basically every bit of your body is important for sprint kayaking, in my opinion. The stroke is entire body. You're moving your whole body. Everything needs to be healthy, functioning. You can't really look over one thing, because then you're losing either energy to that part not functioning as well, or losing power from what you could be applying throughout the stroke and efficiency. You do one more question, then I'll hand it over to Susan, or if that's good, I can go straight over now. Mental training. It's a great question. I mean, one thing that I've been lucky enough with over the past couple of years is with the sports psych, being able to kind of both visualize races, but also I feel any athlete, especially young athletes, we're comparing ourselves on social media to other athletes. And like anytime I know I see someone else training, I'm like, oh boy, even if I just completed a workout, I'm like, I should be on the water. I should be in the gym. And so I think the biggest thing overall mentally wise is just be learning and reminding myself to trust the process and knowing that what I'm doing is the right thing for me, even if it's not what everyone else is doing, or if it looks like someone is doing more. And so that kind of helped me big picture, but down to racing specifically, I often go to bed visualizing my race plan, whether that's for K2, K4, whatever the race is. I do that before a race, I do it after a race, in a workout, after a workout, going to bed, waking up, basically any chance I get, I think about kayaking just because I love it so much, but it also adds to both the mental gains on it. And then I guess so one more quick question, or I guess shoot, there's two more. I'll do them quick and then we'll go to Susan.
Go.
How can we build more sprint youth development teams in the USA? That's a hard one. Because we're so small, we don't have many coaches, and because we're so unsupported, they have to love the sport and love how they do it, which is one thing great that you hear about Rivertown Racers with Susan and Mish. You have to kind of devote your time for free in a sense. There's not much infrastructure or funding for everything, but I think right now we need to support the athletes we have and try to get more visibility to the sport, to then hopefully appeal more and more athletes, and then expand our programs, and then through that expanding athletes, we can expand coaches and get more and more opportunities. Then to wrap it up, this is a good last question. Continue through the next Olympics. Is it compatible with my career goals? I'm going to make it compatible. Honestly, like I said, I'm studying marine biology and chemistry. I'd love to pursue grad school in my field, but most of my peers are doing 6, 10 or more week internships and research cruises, whether that's in the middle of the Pacific or up in Alaska or at various places. And I found that's not the most compatible with continuous elite athletic training. But my hope is that I can both continue my career, eventually go to grad school, but find jobs that are flexible enough or hybrid enough that I can be hands-on in my field while still traveling and competing for paddling. But again, that's just a dream, so I got to figure it out. But it's one step at a time.
Good luck.
With that, I'd love to hand it over either back to Brian or over to Susan to talk more about Rivertown Racers.
Thanks, Jonas. Your comments about there not being very many coaches is a perfect segue to a coach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Susan Starbird, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Let me get my slides going here. And where's my slideshow? There it is. So this is perfect. Thank you so much, Jonas, because you laid the groundwork for the ultimate goal, which is more than I get to talk about often. So I'm rusty, and you have wonderful recent experience, and you talk at length about the pathway to the Olympics. And Rivertown Racers is at the beginning of that pathway. We have right now 20 young athletes and 5 coaches, of which 2 earn a tiny pittance because they are young and they are also athletes. But the rest of us have been volunteers since the beginning. And the beginning, I'm not sure when the beginning was. Paul McIntyre might remember, but we incorporated in 2016. And actually, speaking of the history, I had the privilege of going as a coach with Jonas's Olympic Hopes Regatta team in 2018. And I learned an incredible amount from that experience as well. And I was really happy to be able to bring it home to kids like this who are aspiring to progress along that path. We start at age 11 and our oldest athlete's 26. We usually start with a camp where people have their first taste of using wing paddles and skinny boats. And it takes a lot of adaptation if you've been paddling in a traditional sea kayak or a sit on top. It's a really different thing. I think that our sport probably appeals to 0.1% of kayakers in the US, and it is a special breed. So if we can keep this many kids out of a camp, after a camp, we're really successful. They start racing immediately in boats that look like racing boats, although they're more stable. And it takes years, as you probably figured out from Jonas's path. You go through a succession of steps, and you start at a club level like he did in Bellingham and we do in Petaluma. This girl has been paddling 3 years, and she's very sophisticated. If she saw this photo, she would cringe because she would be critiquing her stroke just from seeing this photo. This is what the beginning looks like. Your first race. This is in the San Rafael Canal at 101 Surf Sports, and what it led to about 5 years later is the little inset photo. We train year-round, and we survive. This is a typical scene at the end of a workout. You have to really love training. It's not just about winning. You have to love getting on the water and going, oh my God, are all these paddles going in the water at the same time? Are we stroking at the same rate? Are we all in the same position? We ask ourselves that constantly. And then we get to race. And as much as we love training, we really love racing. And we get to train and race in beautiful places. This is from the Berryessa Marathon that we host every year. On the top row, it's the intensity. I think this is at Green Lake in Seattle. And on the bottom, it's a Le Mans start at Doran Beach. That race is coming up on October 5th again, and this kind of chaos is what the starting line looks like. As much as we love racing, we love winning. Here's a girl who's just made her 4th or 5th medal at a race in Green Lake in Seattle. There's one venue in Oklahoma that has nighttime racing, even if you still feel like you have to wear your sunglasses. And because the community is so small, we get to rub shoulders and elbows with the celebrities of our sport. On the left, it's 2 Rivertown racers and Jonas and a K4 that the 4th person has already jumped out of. And on the right is, what is this team, Jonas? Is it the junior team?
That's the junior U23 team from 2022, I think, in Zagreb.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that would have been the photo of Aaron and I in blue singlets from 2022 would have been this event here.
Uh-huh. And I was proud to notice 4 Rivertown racers in this picture, which meant that we sent 4 people to that race, which is really good for a little club like ours. Oops, sorry. This year we have two athletes went to the Olympic Hopes Regatta in Hungary. And, you know, if you're looking at this group, the next bunch of Olympians are probably in this group, just like what happened in 2018. That was a very elite group of athletes then, and these people are very promising. They're aged 15 to 17. These are the 2 from Rivertown racers that traveled this year. They just got home on Monday. But, you know, winning medals and standing on a podium isn't the only way that you can win in Rivertown racers. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. The support and affection of families is a big part of the club at this level. We have our traditions. One of them is a family camp out at Lake Berryessa that's combined with a marathon race. The kids learn how to fix boats. All of our repairs are done by members of the team. So they work with fiberglass, they work with hardware. It's a big production because our boats, a lot of them are old and need a lot of help. And another tradition is to throw the team captain in the water every year. And I hope that the crazy race known as the Turkey Relay will happen again in 2024. That's Santa in the background coming up the Petaluma River, and the audience might recognize some of these familiar faces in this crowd. All single craft are welcome to this race. We just haven't set the date yet. So that's, in summary, sort of who we are, what we're doing. And we haven't produced any Olympians yet, but you know, if somebody might emerge from the crowd that you saw at the beginning of the slideshow. So if anyone who wants to get involved in what we're doing, here are a bunch of ways to do it. We need workout leaders. We need people who are willing to learn to be coaches. We want more paddlers. We need to underwrite travel expenses because, like, for example, this year, one group went to Seattle, and then some of the same people then a couple of months later went to national championships in Georgia. So that's how to reach us, and that's the end. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Susan. Good job.
Thanks, Dan.
One of the challenges Susan didn't mention is that there's a real lack of other teams for our kids to compete with. So the closest team is, you know, San Diego and Seattle. And so it's harder. Like, my kid has to travel for soccer to, like, Fort Bragg, but I mean, if for kayaking, you have to go to Seattle. So it would be, we have some support from the Berkeley Club, you know, but the kids are mostly racing with adults locally and the different regattas and races. But, you know, we'd love to have another junior team to compete with.
That's for sure. Tom.
I'm curious to know the state of the competitive paddling in the U.S. compared with other countries. When Ellen and I lived in Japan and France in 2014, we noticed that in France there were many both river kayak and sea kayak clubs that had a variety of kinds of teams that were really heavily supported by the government of France, who really feels that it's France's best interest for people to be very active physically, and they support all kinds of recreational activities. And I was just amazed at the number of groups of kids I saw out in kayaks, learning to kayak. And I don't feel like we have that in this country. And I wondered, especially for those of you that have encountered people from other countries, how does the U.S. compare with other countries in this regard?
Jonas, do you want to address that one?
Sure. Short answer is we don't. I mean, we're slowly starting to. But I mean, like Susan and Dan both said, many athletes have to travel across states to compete with other athletes. I'm lucky enough being in Washington. We have 4 or 5 clubs within the I-5 corridor up here, but that's the biggest concentration in the US. Our nationals has from ages 0 to 100, any boat class, men, women, canoe, kayak. Last 250 maybe athletes are competing, versus you'll have a club that has 300 athletes in a country like France or something. And so additionally, we don't receive any government funding. That's true for all American sports. Many countries have either lottery funding or subsidy from the government to promote either youth activities that are then translated to sports teams or just like their national teams in general. But we do not receive any of that type of support from the government. We do, however, receive some funding from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but that all is routed from private donors and corporations that are choosing to support us. And currently, we have very little sponsors specifically for Canoe Kayak. So if you know someone who has some money burning a hole in their pocket or needs a good tax write-off, I bet the entirety of U.S. Canoe Kayak, or at least the Rivertown Racers, would greatly thank you for your support.
Yeah, we could make good use of it. Yeah, there's a saying among youth development clubs, and I don't know if it's really true, but that there are more sprint kayakers in Budapest than there are in the entire U.S.
I would say maybe even double.
Maureen, was that question about boat design directed at Jonas or to me?
What was it, Jonas? But I had a question about funding. My daughter was on the crew team. And if there's not football, the Title IX seems to help some funding for college athletes. Is there any collegiate teams where it's usually the women that get the Title IX funding, but I was curious about that. And the question about the boat design was for Jonas, yeah, just because I was curious. You've been in the Olympics and you must have talked to the other world athletes and what they thought.
Yeah, the boat design question is a pretty good quick one, and I'll circle back to the funding one. But the boat wise, there's kind of one company that manufactures I guess the top of the line or gold standard boat design, and that's Nello Kayaks, based out of Portugal. And so they have 3 leading models, and then from that, pretty much all international athletes race one of those 3 models. And so you kind of just pick which one is best for your paddling style and run with it. Funding wise and athletics in college, 0. Worse, even less than we get from our governing bodies, because kayaking is not recognized by the NCAA or any other intercollegiate athletic organization. And that's one thing of not receiving funding, but then it also means that it's very challenging for athletes like myself and then athletes on Rivertown Racers who are aging out of a junior program to then continue in college, because continuing in college often means competing internationally for a lot of us, which means travel, which means being in different time zones, missing school. And so the ability and flexibility is often very limited when working in the college programs. And so I've had times where I've had to fully miss exams for national selections, where it's like either I sit out the entire season or take a hit on an exam, and I'm definitely going to pick paddling. And so of course I want to progress my academics. It's gotta win some and lose some. And how does he get recognized by the NCAA? I'm not really sure. It's not that like one team gets recognized. The NCAA has to accept your sport for like all American athletics in college. And so we're a long way from that, because you need coaches at every single college that has a team. You need the funding to make it happen. And as you were mentioning with rowing, a lot of the times, like with Title IX, that can greatly support a lot of various athletic teams, but there often a lot of the funding comes from visibility or sponsorship. And given we're such a small sport, there's often not many people are too interested in advertising on your kayak. They're gonna want more bang for their buck in their eyes for advertising at a football game. And so it's a slow battle, but it's slowly improving. But I think it'll be a long time before we are in a collegiate system.
There have been a couple of college scholarships that have been, I think, negotiated with individual clubs in the past, but it's very rare.
The other thing is that a lot of kids that are lost to rowing when it comes time to go to college, because you can get a scholarship or at least an activity to do in college. And the kayak teams often share the same shed with the rowers. So they, but you know, it's difficult to keep going after college, but San Diego and Seattle are two areas where there's a lot of college age people that continue to participate in clubs.
Well, and I would like to put in a plug for lifetime paddling, because one of the things that I have gotten out of the sport is the opportunity to compete even as an adult. I didn't start kayaking until I was 30. And so I missed those years of prime development if you want to be super competitive. But I still was able to race overseas a couple of times. And I love getting in a fast boat and feeling the glide. And I love training still. So there is a big element to you know, if you learn to kayak efficiently and with skill and resist injury as a young person, then you can continue for many, many years into middle age and still be competitive in your age group. Why did I say middle age? I've seen 80-year-olds at international races.
Really?
And I'm sure they continued after I saw them too.
I'm actually wearing a shirt under this. Is a little hard to see, but it so I'm wearing a quarter zip, but it says Drano at 80, and one of our local paddlers up in Bellingham, Duncan Howitt, recently turned 80, and it was his goal when turning 80 to do the Drano run in the Columbia Gorge, which is a very famous downwind path. And so he successfully did it and made t-shirts for everybody. And up in Bellingham, as Susan was saying, a lot of our paddlers are actually 60 plus. They lovingly call themselves the Barnacles. And they're always on the water, up for a chat or some good banter. But it's a great lifelong sport, even if you're just doing it for fun, competing. I mean, they all still race. It's a great opportunity.
Jonas, didn't you do the race out of Port Townsend, the 72 something or other?
70-48, I did not. That was Aaron. Aaron did that
Okay.
with our other roommate Wilson back in 2022. It's definitely something on my bucket list of races, but I'm gonna wait till I'm done with sprint racing to take a stab at that.
And if I recall, Aaron finished that race and then came straight to the sprint race at Green Lake.
Correct. He started it, I think it was around 7 p.m. the night before, finished it about 5 a.m. That morning, drove to Seattle, and then we proceeded to then win the men's double events at that event.
I see another question here, Jonas. What is your diet when you race?
Ooh, in general, I'm on a seafood diet, seafood and eat it. But other than that, I mean, I found, especially as an elite athlete and just as a person in general, dieting can often be counterproductive. And so I try to just eat balanced meals and not overeat, just eat till I'm full, but also don't keep myself from eating. If I get hungry, have a snack. But eating healthy is the biggest thing. Having balance, having greens, carbs, proteins, fats, everything is important for a balanced diet for both succeeding in athletics and also daily life. And so just, I guess, overall eating healthy and eating enough is kind of what I try to do when it comes down to racing or just training in general. But it does make an expensive grocery bill, that's for sure.
What's the question you get asked the most when people find out you went to the Olympics?
They asked about the chocolate muffins. I don't know if any of you guys saw those. It was very popular on social media, but there were these chocolate muffins in the village, and everyone in the village seemed to love them. I never actually had any because I was competing later, and so I elected to not have any before racing. But I took some out to my partner and my family, and they tried them. They said they were fine. Nothing to write home about. So I mean, to each their own, but they're described to me as a pretty good Costco muffin. So if you love Costco, it's a great option, but I don't think they're anything too special.
Great. I went to the Olympics and all I got was this lousy chocolate muffin.
Yeah, really.
But I did have other fantastic French cuisine and pastries while I was there after racing, which was great.
The question I get the most is that a rowboat?
Yep.
Or
Is that
can
a
I try
robot?
it?
I found that the general public has rowing, paddleboarding, kayaking, kind of all under the same thing. They're all interchangeable to the general public, and the best way for me to describe it is rowers go backwards, I go forwards, but still that doesn't seem to work.
I'm guessing you don't do a lot of turning and it's more straight line paddling. If one of us average sea kayakers was to hop in, how long would we sit there before we fell over, you think?
Less than a second.
Less than a second.
I think the common sentence is if you were to put even probably a good surf ski paddler, but the average Joe or average paddler or average person on the street in a kayak, I've had many people say, I'll pay, like other athletes being like, I'll pay you $10,000 if you can take 3 strokes. No one ever can.
Oh.
I'm not offering that deal. I don't have that type of assets, but I've heard people do it.
Well, Jennifer says, how do you learn to balance? If you can't take
I mean, Susan can probably describe this better because she teaches people to do it. I just figured it out over time, but you do spend more time in the water than in the boat. I can hand it off to Susan. She probably can describe it better. I just kind of suffered until I got it.
We have a lot of tricks to help people practice balancing. But the first thing that we do is we start people in more stable boats. So they're shaped roughly like racing boats, but they're much more stable. So the kids don't spend, 45 minutes out of every hour in the water when they first start out. They get confident and they start to learn how to move the boat forward. And then when they move up to the next level of boat is when they confront the more difficult balance boats. Those boats are probably, I don't know, 14 inches wide at the waterline or something like that. So they're pretty tippy, but they're not the most tippy yet. And we do a lot of drills, where you have to balance with your hips and your lower body as opposed to relying on the paddle to keep your balance. Like all of you who are sea kayakers, and especially those of you who paddle Greenland boats, have a lot of experience sculling and using draw strokes to keep your boat upright. Whereas you can't do that in a racing boat. You have to put all your energy into moving the boat forward. So you have to balance it with the other parts of your body. So the trick that we adopted just in the past week, we just learned it in the past week, is we set an individual in the boat in a place where the person could climb out of the water pretty easily. And we take their paddle away and hand them a bucket of water that probably only has a couple of inches of water in the bottom of it. And we say, do a Russian twist with this bucket of water, which involves holding it and then moving it all the way over on either side of the boat without tipping the boat with your hips. And it's really, really hard. And it helps people isolate the parts of their body that they need to use to keep their balance.
Mm.
So that's just the coach's latest trick in our club. Mm. But we do lots and lots of balance drills. And if you start at an early age, your center of gravity is so low that you tend to be more stable anyway. If you start at age 30, as I did, I hate to say it, but you never really get comfortable in a sprint boat. You might be able to paddle it, you might be able to race it, but it's not nowhere near as pretty as it would be if you started as a youngster.
The last question Margot typed in, can the boats be paddled in active water, or is it pretty much relying on flat?
I think that active needs to be defined.
I mean, you can take them in any water. They are like technically, the more adverse or funky the water is, the more challenging it can be. We wear skirts sometimes if it's windier or wavier, and that can help, but we can take on water, and since our boats are hollow, we can sink, and so it's kind of just your comfort level. Obviously, best conditions for us are glass, flat, still water, but I mean, even on the Petaluma slough there, it's tidal, and so there's current both ways. And the first time I paddled in Petaluma, one of their athletes took me through an eddy while distracting me, and I ended up in the water. So, always watch out for those Petaluma paddlers.
The other thing is all the wash from the other racers. So it helps to be in front.
Right. We know a paddler who took a sprint boat around Angel Island. He paddled in a Sea Trek race and he survived, but you have to be really exceptionally balanced. I lent my sprint boat to a woman who surfed it at what's that beach, Paul, where you go on Tuesday afternoons?
Just in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Berkeley Marina.
Yeah, she surfed my sprint boat at the Berkeley Marina. It was pretty impressive.
So if people are interested in these boats, the Berkeley Club is got everything from sprint boats to fairly stable surf skis. Nowadays, if you're not really training to be a sprint kayaker, but you do want to race fast boats, there's a lot of more stable surf skis available. So you're not spending your whole time being scared of falling over, that you could actually have fun and race. And I would also say that our local race scene, I'm 68. I often paddle against people in their 70s and a few in their 80s, but we also paddle against the teenagers. One of my favorite things about this sport is I get to paddle with the Rivertown Racer crew, and I see them when they're tiny teens, barely see them over the rim of a cockpit. And then 5 years later, they're just huge, fast monsters of paddlers, and it's just, you get to see their progress. And it's a super family-friendly scene. It's fun. Everybody's there to compete, but we support each other and just have a blast.
Yeah, there's so many races in the Bay Area this fall. I hesitated to list them because I felt like I would leave something out, but the one at Doran Beach in Sonoma County is on October 5th, and then there's a race at 101 Surf Sports on November 16th, and there's Sea Trek and Battle of the Bay, and there's a lot going on in the Bay Area at this time of the year.
There's at least 2 a month on to February, March. Sometimes 3 a month. So yeah, it's just it's a good time.
And these don't have to be super competitive. You can bring what you have and do what you can.
Well, thank you, Jonas and Susan, for joining us tonight. I think if you've got further questions, Susan had her contact info up there. Maybe you could type it into the chat and it would be there if anyone wanted to contact the Rivertown Racers. And thank you so much both for your time and your stories, and pleasure hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks for your attention.